Hey, what's rowdy? Welcome back to News Toast, and we have a couple big leaks to talk about today. One is for the Pokemon series, as they've been hit by another Giga leak, if you will. Think about the Insomniac leak a few years back. It's actually very similar to that situation because it leaked out their planned roadmap, which includes multiple mainline Pokemon games, including a dream title for a lot of fans. So we're going to get into all of that, and then also the PlayStation 6 versus the next Xbox, because next generation just got a little more interesting. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with Pokemon Legends ZA. It will be out here in just a few days, but reviews are already rolling out, and check this out. It currently has an 81 overall score on Metacritic, which is a bit lower than Legends Arceus, which got an 83, but it's also a lot higher than Scarlet and Violet's 72. So, I think Pokemon fans should be fairly happy with this score because most critics do seem to enjoy it. It's being described as a refreshing take for the series thanks to its new battle system, but the city itself can feel a bit restrictive at times. This game does focus more on the battles, which to me, I think is a good thing, but I can also see how some people might enjoy more exploration and just catching Pokemon, which there definitely was more of an emphasis on that in Legends Arceus. So it kind of depends on what style you prefer in the Pokemon games, but all in all, it sounds like Legends ZA is another good game in the Legends series. It definitely continues to be a very interesting spin-off to the mainline titles because more or less it gives Game Freak a way to experiment with new ideas. Now, we also got an update from one of Sony's first-party studios, being Bluepoint. Historically, I think they've been a pretty great studio, though that's really under the idea that they are one of the best remake studios around. They've worked on remakes like Shadow of the Colossus and Demon's Souls, which are really some of the best looking games that you can play, just period. But unfortunately, after the release of Demon's Souls for the PlayStation 5, they moved on over to a live service God of War project, which ultimately got canceled. No surprise there. It really doesn't even seem like a good idea on paper, but they wasted a lot of time on that game, which is certainly frustrating, not just for them, but I think for fans as well. However, thanks to a new job listing, we're now getting an idea of what their next project will be. As a part of a new job listing, they said one of the minimum qualifications is to have a solid understanding of combat systems and mechanics for third-person melee action experiences. And this has a lot of people very, very optimistic because, again, typically, Bluepoint has been known to make just amazing remakes. And if you look at their work on Demon's Souls, they truly did a fantastic job on that game. And even after its release, there was a lot of hopium that their next game would be another Sony first-party From Software experience, of course, being Bloodborne. That kind of seems like the next no-brainer move, and fans have been begging for a 60 FPS update for years now. And Bluepoint, they could do a lot better than just a 60 FPS remaster. They could do a full-on remake in the same vein as Demon's Souls, and I think fans would go crazy over something like that. Now, at the same time, though, I think everybody needs to kind of keep in mind that this job listing is very vague. So, as much as I would love this to be a Bloodborne remake, I think that would be fantastic, but I'm also going to go and spread caution just because there's really not enough information to go by as of this time. Oh, and we might now know when Assassin's Creed Shadows will drop for the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, the existence of Shadows on the Switch 2 has been in the rumor mill for a long time as is, but thanks to Bilbo-kun, he claims a physical version will launch on December 5th in France for €50. Now, he did note that it will be a game keycard, which, okay, that's unfortunately expected by this point. But in all truth, I think this game may be facing a steeper challenge than just that. I'd say Ubisoft's bigger problem here is that this release date is just not a very good one, considering Metroid Prime 4 will release just one day before, being on December 4th. So, I think a lot of Nintendo fans will instead prioritize Metroid, but at the same time, this is the holiday period, so maybe it won't impact Shadows quite as much. Sure, I would have probably chosen a different date myself, but we'll see what happens. All right, now let's just go and talk about next generation, because a lot of information has come out these past few weeks. I mean, Sony and AMD even sat down and discussed some of the technology that they're going to use for next generation consoles. So we are now officially in the cycle of next generation news. Now, I think that might be a little bit strange for some people, though, just because I think for a lot of people, it still feels like this generation has yet to hit its groove, and I completely understand that. But at the same time, we are now hearing 2027 as a potential year for next-generation consoles. So they really could be right around the corner by this point. And, that's not to say that 2027 is definitive or anything, but in terms of planning, that is sounding like a possible date for both the PlayStation 6 and the next generation Xbox. Now, I think in terms of PlayStation, their plans are fairly straightforward. They're going to have a more powerful PlayStation being the PlayStation 6, and it's going to utilize their upgraded version of PSSR, which is, of course, their AI upscaling technology. Now, personally, I think they're using the PlayStation 5 Pro as a beta of sorts to better that technology. However, the one thing that PlayStation is doing a bit different next generation is that they're also working on a PlayStation 6 handheld, and we've already seen some inklings of that future. Sony recently released a low-powered mode for the PlayStation 5, which games can opt in to use, and that option could majorly benefit a handheld that tries to play said PS5 games that supports that feature. Now, we talked about that in a previous video, so I'm not going to get too much into that today, but Xbox's next generation plan, I think, is a little more curious just because their position in the console market is a little bit more uncertain than PlayStation. They've moved over to being more of a multi-platform company, and that's going to bring some challenges with it. And even Game Pass is less attractive than what it once was because of its significant price hikes. So in terms of their next console, it's going to be very interesting to see how they try to position it and how they try to sell it to customers. And well, according to some new information, we might now have an idea or a couple of ideas as to what they're trying to do. One is what we've been hearing for a better part of 2 years now, and that's the addition of PC storefronts like Steam. The next Xbox will more or less be a PC console hybrid, and that could be enticing for anybody who wants a Steam machine, but also likes the idea of having Xbox games as well. I mean, for that matter, Microsoft previously confirmed that it will have backwards compatibility, which means for anybody who's already in the Xbox ecosystem will have a reason to be interested in their next console. Their other selling point, though, and this here is new information, is that allegedly they're planning the next Xbox to be more powerful than the PlayStation 6. This is according to Moore's Law's Dead, which he has gotten some things correct in the past, and he claimed that the AMD Magnus APU, which Magnus is the codename for the next Xbox, but the APU combines a CPU and GPU on a single chip, and it will be the largest one ever used in a game's console. Allegedly, it will be 46% larger than the one that's planned for the PlayStation 6. So he claims the result of that is that the next Xbox will be more powerful than the PlayStation 6, but of course, that also means that it's going to be more expensive. So if this turns out to be true, then Xbox will be playing the power games for next generation. Maybe you won't necessarily buy the next Xbox for exclusives as we used to do for consoles, but if you want to play multi-platform games, maybe at the best of their ability, then Xbox might be a good option depending on just how much more powerful it is than the PlayStation 6. And that is important. A lot of this does depend on how much more powerful it is than the PlayStation 6. I mean, technically on the paper, the Xbox Series X is also more powerful than the PlayStation 5, but the results haven't always played out that way. So with that in mind, they might have to shoot to be significantly more powerful this time around. And if they do, I mean, we might be talking about a very powerful console, but also a ridiculously expensive console like we've never seen before. Now, that might still fill a niche within the market for anybody who really wants that ultra premium option, but let me know what you all think about this strategy. Do you think Xbox should play the power game next generation, even if it makes their console significantly more expensive than the PS6, or do you think that that's a bad idea? In my opinion, I think that that's a fairly decent idea just because otherwise I don't know if Xbox has enough to differentiate itself from the PlayStation 6, which will get a good portion of Xbox games alongside their own exclusives. Now, one more thing before we go, though, because the Pokemon Company was hit by a massive, and I mean an absolutely massive leak. This is very similar situation to the Insomniac leak a few years back when their roadmap leaked out online. In this situation, we're also getting similar information from this leak, though I'm not going to post any images or anything like that on my channel just for copyright-related reasons. Now, if you want all of that type of information, go check out Centro Leaks on Twitter. They've been posting a lot of stuff about this leak. What I'm going to try to do here, though, is that I'm going to try to condense this to some of the more interesting points because, like I said, there's just a ton that's leaked out online. Now, also as a bit of a warning, some of the leaked plans goes all the way back to 2021, and that means that plans very well could have changed for a lot of what we're about ready to talk about, so just kind of keep that in mind. First up here, though, is Pokemon Generation 10. According to the leak, it is planned for 2026, though it was originally planned for 2025. Now, that's actually really good news because even for Generation 11, which also leaked, is planned for 2030. And that means that they are moving to a 4-year development cycle as opposed to their typical 3-year cycles, which clearly has not been working ever since they moved over to the Switch generation. Scarlet and Violet is one of the best examples of a rushed game that we have in today's market. So hopefully this extra year of time will be a good thing for fans. Now, Generation 10, though, I mean, this sounds pretty large in scope. Its title is Wind and Wave, and it'll be set in a Southeast Asia with a survival jungle setting. It's also going to be running on a new engine, which that in itself seems very exciting. There was even concept art type of stuff that leaked out, and it was actually fairly impressive for a Pokemon game. Now, at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean the end result will match that concept. But at the bare minimum, it does appear that Game Freak wants to improve Pokemon's visuals. I mean, we'll see what happens with all that. I'd urge people not to get overly excited until we see final footage, though, and I'll just simply leave it at that. Now, the new battle mechanic will be weather moves. They've had a new gimmick in every game since X and Y, and this seems to be more in line with how they approached Sun and Moon, where the gimmick will be attack-based, which personally I'm fine with. I didn't like the terraforms in Scarlet and Violet or the Gigantamax stuff in Sword and Shield. I thought those were pretty dumb, to be completely honest, but hey, that's just my opinion. Now, the one other thing that caught my attention for Generation 10, though, is that they're planning to have procedurally generated content. Now, that could be a little bit controversial, but the way that I read this is that there's going to be a new seed Pokemon that, when evolved, it will be procedurally generated, so your version will be unique to you. And there's also some procedurally generated islands as well that you can actually share with other people online. So that doesn't mean the entire game will be procedurally generated, and that's why I don't think that it should be too controversial, but it will have some procedurally generated content to fit in with their theme, being infinity. So overall, I think Generation 10 sounds fairly ambitious on paper, but given their past couple of releases, I still think the fans should remain cautious until we see what those plans actually amount to. However, we're already hearing about their next Legends game, which is planned for 2027 or possibly later. 2027 is not the definitive plan in this case, and my guess is that 2028 seems more likely just given that ZA just now released. But nonetheless, it's planned to be another origin experience similar to Arceus. It will be set in Galar 1,000 years in the past. So I don't necessarily know about Galar being, or Galar, however you pronounce it, being the next region for the Legend series, just because Sword and Shield is probably not the most beloved entry, but I'll be excited to see what they do with the Legend series. It is inspired by Xenoblade because they flat out used Xenoblade images in its pitch. I mean, I think we're already seeing some of its inspiration in ZA's battle mechanics, but they could take that a step further in the next game with possibly its scope as well, and with the addition of Gigantamax Pokemon, which is probably why they chose Galar as the region. And then the last game that we're going to talk about is really a dream type of game for Pokemon fans. This is something that fans have been asking for a very, very long time, being a Pokemon MMO. It's apparently a multi-region remake planned for 2028, and the regions that'll be included are Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and lastly, Sinnoh. So, I mean, just on paper, this is actually pretty insane. This is a very ambitious title, but I'd also say that it makes perfect sense if they want to make a ton of money. I mean, think about MMOs like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 16, and Fallout 76. This is the type of game that could live on for years and years and years with new expansions. It could live on for the next couple of decades if they wanted it to. Now, maybe they just start out with a couple of regions, but with every expansion, they could add another region. I think that sounds pretty amazing on paper, but because it's so ambitious, it's also hard to say what will actually come to fruition. And that's the most important thing to take away from this entire leak. A lot of these plans come from years ago. And the thing you have to understand is that plans constantly change. So all I'm trying to say is to not take this information and think that this will definitely happen. Yes, we have an idea of what they want to do, but that also doesn't mean that all of this will actually happen. And I do think that that's important to understand. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.